A little backstory here. Many years ago, well, maybe it's not that many years ago when I think about it, but probably in the past 10 years, a representative from a large pharmaceutical company contacted me in my consulting practice and wanted me to help them design a system for better managing their supply chain, specifically you, my listening audience, production rental companies, the people who own the equipment and get their shows done for these corporations. Now, this was interesting to me because in my life and my experience, we didn't deal directly with corporations. We always dealt with a large production company, one of the big, the big five production companies or an independent production company. There was always somebody between us and that buyer at the pharmaceutical company or any large corporation. Very rarely did they would buy from us direct. But they bought so many meetings, and some of them quite small, such as a $3,000 medical education training session in a restaurant on a Tuesday morning, that they became very tactical about purchasing. And the premise of this call was that their suppliers were making too much money. And the way that they knew this is that when they called around the industry, they got inconsistent pricing. When they got quotes from different companies, and they were even going into our supply chain, going into the wholesale rental company and gathering the prices that they could get from there. And the assumption was that whatever the lowest price was the market rate, and that everybody else was charging more, which was basically in their mind, in this representative's mind, stealing from their company. So these people make too much money. And I said, well, how do you know that? I said, well, we look at all these pricing and some of these prices are really high. I said, well, all the prices are made up. She goes, we don't believe so. That's not how industry works. And I just laughed. It was a short conversation. I disagreed with the premise. I disagreed with the notion that the customer should dictate what your profit should be and should presume that they have the knowledge to understand how you should manage your business and what your costs actually are across thousands of companies across all of North America and around the world, that somehow this pharmaceutical company had figured out something that no other Fortune 100 company had ever figured out, was that suppliers make a profit. So I took one for you guys. I didn't take the gig, but I really thought the premise was fundamentally wrong, but it got me to thinking.
Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Mertz Crew.
Mertz Crew helps top AV companies book quality AV freelancers. Your choice, your rates. We handle contracts, insurance, and payments. You save time, cost, and reduce risk. Start today at mertzcrew.com.
Now on to the show.
So what did that make me think about? It made me think about how we had created this monster. We had created this monster as an industry by doing line item quotations for all the years that I'd been in business, because we started as a rental industry. You'd buy some slide projectors, some overheads, and some tripod screens. You'd look at the purchase price, you divide it by 10. That became your rental rate. And that was your rental day rate. If they needed it longer, you made it a day and a half or 2 days or 3 days. And if they needed it for a week, we probably charged them 3 times the 1 day rate. If they needed it for a month, oh my God, our brains fried. We didn't know how to calculate that. Turns out the number was 7, but it took, I think, 15 years of me being in the industry before I convinced people that, yeah, it's 7, guys, do the math. But long and the short of it is that we created this problem by being too transparent with customers. And by doing that, we were telling them that if this is the level of information I'm giving you, which is far exceeds what anybody else in any other industry would share with their buyers, then we must have even more information that we're hiding. And we're moving, the cups around to make money. And the fact is, that's not untrue. We just weren't smart enough to know that that's what we were doing, because we had a rental rate, we had a multiplier, we could change either one, we had discounts, we had terms. There's multiple variables on every single order. There was no pricing normalcy whatsoever. And it just blew the minds of everybody in procurement around the world who were used to negotiating, half a percentage point on deals. And any three of us could go to market and quote on something and be 30 or 40% apart on deals. I mean, I regularly quoted shows when I was in sales where the client came back and said, well, you're in the middle of the pack. You guys came in at 80. We had two companies that came in at 60 and 45. And we had one company that came in at 250 and one that came in at 200. How do you get from $60,000 to $250,000 on the same quote? And I'll tell you why. We don't know what we're doing, which is probably why for so many years, our industry has not made money. Basically, since the recession of 2001, it's been really hard to make a consistent double-digit profit. And we've carried these practices through the years that's kept us from doing this. Now, what happens now? Every time we write a quote, we're reinventing the wheel because we still don't have a standardized process for doing that. And the clients are negotiating with us. And what they're basically saying is they want you to make less money. And you're going, well, I really want this gig, but I'd like you to make less money. Except that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is I want to pay less money. But what we interpret it as is we need to make less money. And so we decide if we want to make less money, and we say, okay, I could make less money. And we give them the gig and we didn't negotiate. That's not how negotiation works. Negotiation is they give something up, you give something up. They give something up, you give something up. But no, you're basically, because you've made up your numbers, you're willing to go to whatever will make the customer happy, as long as you don't have to change your design or move any line items around or compromise on your vision for the show. Nightmare stuff. So now we're down to, how do we price jobs when we really need them? Well, we've established these pricing parameters, perhaps. Do we give them up because we're really hungry for cash flow and we want to do the job for less? And how do we tell the customer that they're not going to pay the same next time? Again, we're going through all this rigmarole over and over again because we don't understand how to make money or where our profit comes from. And we don't understand that every decision about what we sell a job for is a decision about how much profit you're willing to accept for that project. And the fact is, how much profit is available if you sat down and did the math. It's not that difficult. You basically look at what your direct costs are going to be based on how busy you expect to be. It won't be perfect, but you've got a good idea. And what you're willing to charge. What's left in between is margin. That's your gross profit. Is there enough gross profit for you to sell it for 80,000? Great. Sell it for 80,000. If you sold it for 60, is there enough? I don't know. You decide. That's really what we're doing in our industry. Now, when customers come to you and say, well, thank you for negotiating with me, but we really need to see a detail in your quote. Well, said, I already gave you the best price of anybody you're talking to. I'm not going to itemize what we quote. Well, we have to have itemized quotes. Well, tell me why you need itemized quotes. Well, we have to be able to do comparisons. Well, you're comparing my $80,000 to $250,000. How much of a comparison do you need to do? They say, well, that's just the way that we do business. Awesome. Okay. What are they going to do with that information? Well, we're going to compare and we're going to decide if your price is fair. Okay. And what determines if my price is fair? Well, we don't make sure that you're not making too much money off of us. Okay. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to tell us what your profit is. It's like, okay. So are you now going to guarantee me how much profit margin I'm going to make? Is that what we're negotiating? If I said to you, my profit on this job needs to be $25,000, will you take that at face value? And now the price is whatever is dictated by me making $25,000. Well, no. You still have to assume the risk. So I have to assume the risk. You get to tell me what profit I make, and I could make less because I'm the one assuming the risk, which means you're not actually guaranteeing me any profit at all. Why should I show you my numbers? Right? And we're going around this circle in a circle. Now, the reason we've let ourselves fall into this is because we've never codified what our pricing structure should be. And it's real simple, folks. It is cost plus margin is what you sell for. And there is a price that you can put on something that you can discount that price if you have to work for retail and discount. But if nobody pays retail, it's not actually a retail price, is it? It's just a starting point to help you get to the number. A better starting point, one used by every other industry in the world, is you look at the cost of something, you look at what it takes to acquire it, store it, prep it, deliver it. You add those costs on top of the cost for the product to purchase it. You add those other services on top of that. And now that is your cost basis for that item. Every time you use that item in your rental inventory, for instance, it costs you money to put it into the field. And if you're out of that item, there's another cost called replacement cost that says if you have to go get another one, here's what it's going to cost you to get it. You have the cost data. You know what it costs you to do things. It doesn't cost you every single time, but it could cost you. This is simple, right? You know what the cost of labor is. Put a profit margin on it. You know what the cost of trucking is. Put a profit margin on it. You know what the cost of travel is. Put a profit margin on it. What about your cost of your gear? Well, we don't know. Our gear's sitting in the warehouse. Is it free? Yeah, it is technically free unless you have to subrent or unless you need a specialty item. Of course, it's not completely free, but it's pretty free. You do have some overhead and carrying costs, but you can't really calculate that on a per job basis, allocating that kind of burden, but you can set a minimal profit margin. Now, can I look at my P&L and note that in the course of the past 12 months, I've spent approximately 10% of revenue on subrentals. I've spent 2% of revenue on repairs, and I've spent 1.5% of revenue on interoffice deliveries or subrental pickups and returns. So I now have this number that says basically I've got 15% of cost against every equipment dollar that I spend, whether I own the gear or not. It's on the average. Great. I now have a cost of equipment. So if my cost of labor plus margin is $50,000, my cost of trucking plus margin, gross profit, is $10,000. My cost of travel plus margin is $10,000. I'm at $70,000. Okay. The client has $150,000. That leaves me $80,000 for equipment. That's a ton of money. My costs on that $80,000 of equipment is going to be roughly, $14,000. Okay. So not only do I make money on that first 70, I make money on the next 80. There's a lot of profit built into this job. That's how you quote. Now, am I willing to take less profit on any given day? Yep, some days you are. But you have to know how to do the math first. Now, you can make your math even easier by not having to do a 3,700 line item quote to get to your $150,000 event. Okay. There are much easier ways to get there. But the fact of the matter is calculating the cost of delivering that event is actually very simple, very easy, and the information's at your fingertips. And now you will be negotiating your profit margin with the customer. And you can say, you know what? Our target net profit for our business is 15%. What's the target net profit for your business? And they go, whoa. Our shareholders expect us to make 20%. I said, great. You're getting a break by hiring me. Okay. My cost for doing this show is X. My gross profit will be Y. My overhead costs applied to this job is Z. That's how I get to 15%. That's the price on your job. How much more transparency you need? Well, we need to know how much the video projector costs. I said, I have shared every detail I need to share with you. And then you can move on and go on to the next job. But the fact is, the first sale is always to yourself. If you don't know what your job is worth, how are you going to negotiate with a customer? If the customer comes to you and says, I got this $150,000 show, but it's the middle of July. We're underwater. We need to get this job done for 120. And you look at your calendar and go, wow, I got a bunch of people sitting on the bench. I got a whole bunch of gear sitting on the shelf and it's a local show. Yep, I'll do it for 120,000 and I'm still going to make 50 grand. Okay. That's the kind of math we need to be doing. Ditch those line items, quit negotiating away your net profit to corporations that are making billions of dollars, right? And quit showing people your math. So there we are. Once again, another lesson about why we don't want to show people our business math and what we could show them instead. Your costs plus a reasonable margin. Get out there and sell something and make some money doing it. Thanks for listening.
If you liked this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast, please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Mertz Crew.